your microphone closer.
All right, it's got spare batteries. We should be good. Okay. So I think we could go to the next slide. Do you want me to repeat the objective since this is out? I'll just go through it really quickly. So again, the objectives tonight are to share changes on the concept plan for the redevelopment of American Legion Drive and the Beverly Road redevelopment areas, weighing the various aspects of this plan from the planning perspective and providing constructive feedback. And I think we can move on to the next slide. So just so we're starting on the same page and on a good footing, I just want to remind folks of, I think, some principles that can guide our discussion tonight. The first one is just my obligation as a planner, the way I see it. My obligation is to serve the public interest. So I don't have, that's why I'm here tonight, is to make sure that this plan can best serve you given the constraints. And so I just want you to know where I'm coming from and my motivations. And then in addition, for all of us in tonight discussing this, I think we can look to the first purpose of the municipal land use law, which is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all land in the state, which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. I think we all should just try to come at tonight with that perspective that we want to achieve public purposes. And so just wanted to set that up for tonight. Next slide. So next slide. Thank you. So I think at the last public meeting, there was a lot of comments on the master plan and how the master plan might influence what is happening on American Legion Drive and Beverly Road. And the first thing that I'd like to assure you is that the master plan will be adopted before any redevelopment plan is considered. So this meeting tonight is early because obviously the master plan isn't anywhere near adoption. I'd like to just give an update on the master plan and then also touch on some relevant aspects of public input that we've already received, and which is public, it's online on the township's website, because I think it'll help the discussion tonight to see how that input might be reflected in a redevelopment plan for this project. So you're probably wondering how the master plan is doing. We started it in June of 2023 with a kickoff meeting, and the original timeline was approximately 12 to 18 months to get it done. And so right now, TNEC is on track. And we're, a full draft is being wrapped up. It's progressing well. And I just want to remind people that at the end of the day, the planning board leads the process in reviewing the master plan, any drafts, in allowing for public input and creating revisions, and eventually they would be the ones to adopt a master plan. So just keep that in mind. I know folks are anxious to hear how the master plan is going, and that's the update I have for you tonight. Next slide. In terms of some community engagement input that we received during the preparation of the master plan, There's some, I think that some of these results are instructive for tonight's topic. So I'll just go through some highlights of these. So respondents to the online survey were asked to select their top concerns related to new development. The first concern was traffic and mobility. The second ranked concern was affordability of any new housing. And the third highest concern was related to aesthetics. Now, at the community workshop, folks were asked, if multi-unit housing is built, where should it be built in the township? And people generally said that the business districts were the appropriate place for new multi-unit housing to go, not residential districts or industrial zones or other things like that. That was the main feedback. And so just keeping that in mind. In terms of Cedar Lane, there was some specific feedback. Things that I just wanted to point out here that might be relevant is that people had a desire for more public gathering spaces. They had support for a parking garage along Cedar Lane, but concerns about the massing of any type garage. Next. Participants were also asked about design preferences for multi-unit buildings. I'm sure you've seen in past concept plans that the project does contemplate multi-unit housing. People at the workshop had preferences for traditional architectural styles as opposed to boxy or bulky or very modern, highly modern or urban styles of architecture. They disliked flat building facades, the outer building wall. They like to see variation and detailing. And there was also a very strong preference in the feedback for providing extensive landscaping in front of buildings in the front yards. People wanted to see parking lots and parking garages have a less visual prominence on business districts in general. They wanted to see more public gathering spaces, public art, outdoor seating, and other public amenities. In general, when looking at different building designs for multi-unit housing, some folks thought that a 4-story building would be appropriate in a business district context as long as it had step backs, which is it's essentially when a building kind of has a layer cake design, so the top floor of a building might be pushed back compared to the lower floors. So that's kind of some of the highlights of the master plan survey and workshop related to development that might be relevant tonight for the project. Next slide. In terms of what you all talked about at the November meeting on the last version of this concept plan, there were definitely, there was specific feedback on the 3 sites, and we'll go through these sites in a moment, but on Beverly Road specifically, folks wanted to see buildings with lower height. They wanted to see potentially step backs or that, again, that layer cake or tiered design to allow more sunlight and shadows on Beverly Road. Essentially, they wanted to reduce what we would call the massing or the bulk of the buildings. People did have a preference for buildings that looked more like townhouses. Some people thought that the garage with 655 spaces was excessive. And people also really wanted to see dense landscaping in the front yard areas. On the north site of American Legion Drive, it's also on the west side of the street. They also wanted to see this reduced massing with lower height and providing more light and air. And on the south site, which is on the east side of American Legion Drive, folks thought that a range of heights were more acceptable in this location compared to the other 2. Some folks specified 3 to 5 stories as being appropriate in this location, and folks thought that setbacks could be more minimal in this area. So here next slide, please. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the site of the project areas. You all, I'm sure, are very familiar, so I won't go into detail. This is the Beverly Road project area. It's the municipal parking lot. It's along a Beverly Road, which has quite a few 2.5-story dwellings. It's also at the rear of the Cedar Lane businesses. And there is a house of worship that's about 3 stories on the corner of Windsor and Beverly. Next slide. This, on the east side of American Legion Drive, there is a yellow line outlining them. I'm sorry if you can't see it. It looks a lot more washed out, at least from my angle. Maybe I can take my mic with me. If you can't see the yellow outline, can folks see the yellow outline? Not so much? Sorry? Everybody can walk up and look. Yeah, if you'd like. I think there's a lot of images we're gonna share, and we can jump back to these. That's the other thing. We can always jump back to these. So this is the Stop and Shop building here in the upper part of the photo. This is the Buddhist Center offices building to the west of it. And then there's the parking lot for the Stop and Shop. And this southern portion of that parking lot, which is on the right-hand side of the page, that's the other project area. And that's why it's called the American Legion Drive South site, because it's sort of at the end of, or the southern end of these 3 areas. It's also on the east side of American Legion Drive. And again, the different land uses in the area are the railroad tracks to the east. You have some businesses with frontage along Water Street to the north. And there are 3-story apartment buildings down in the south and other residential uses along here, but that's a little more related to the next site. Next slide. So then the last site, and this is looking from a different direction. This is on the west side of American Legion Drive, and it's an L-shaped site. This is a municipal parking lot right now. And Alma Terrace is at the north end or the lower part of the page. North Street is at the top left side of the page. And you'll see that there are dwellings along Chestnut Avenue. Behind this site, there is a 3.5, almost 4-story multi-unit building kind of at the inner elbow of that site. The Chestnut Street Farmers Market Plaza is just north of it. And again, it's adjacent to the Stop and Shop on the other side of American Legion Drive. Okay. Do you want me to go back to the Beverly Road image? Okay, if we could go back to the Beverly Road. Okay, so this outline is a little bit, it's all over the place. There's a lot of irregular lot lines on this, but it's essentially the parking lot that's between Beverly Road, Cedar Lane, and Garrison Avenue. Garrison Avenue is here on the right-hand side. Beverly Road is kind of cutting through the middle of the page, but on the south side of what you're looking at here. And then Windsor Road is on the upper right. And Cedar Lane, or upper left, I'm sorry, and Cedar Lane is running along the upper right side of the page. They connect. They do connect. Behind, there's an area where there are some housing. There's some houses here, and the parking lot runs behind. And so it is, yes, you would probably say that it's both parking lots, but it's, on one side of that group of houses, and then it's also on the other side. The train tracks are at the upper left part of the page. And again, this is a house of worship on the corner of Beverly and Windsor. Do folks feel a little bit more comfortable now that they've heard the explanations? Okay, maybe we can go past these set of photos onto the next ones. Okay, so before we get into the concept plans, I just wanted to give the overview of the area for those that aren't familiar with it yet. And I'm going to talk just very quickly about the process related to redevelopment plans, and then we'll transition to the concept plan, the amended concept plan. So redevelopment plans, the process you may or may not be aware of, but generally a governing body authorizes a planning board to prepare a redevelopment study. And if they determine that the areas should be designated as a redevelopment area, then they can go forward with creating a redevelopment plan. These 3 areas have been designated as a redevelopment area. That's already been done. So now we're looking to make a redevelopment plan. The planning board then makes recommendations to a governing body once a redevelopment plan has been prepared. They will look at it, they will come up with recommendations, maybe things to be changed. This is also a chance for the public to comment. And ultimately, the plan and the recommendations from the planning board go to the governing body, which adopts the redevelopment plan. After that, there's still a site plan application that has to occur. And that's when it goes back to the planning board with a full application with detailed plans, just like you would with any other application that might need variances. And the planning board considers it, they have public hearings, it's the normal process, and they consider the evidence and then vote ultimately on the site plan application. Now, a redevelopment plan is essentially what we would consider new zoning for a site. It may incorporate the underlying zoning that's there, but usually it creates a new set of zoning standards and regulations. And with redevelopment plans, you can also require community benefits, which you can't do with a normal development application. And so there is some aspects of a redevelopment plan that are different than normal zoning, and it's a little different than maybe a traditional development application. But I just wanted folks to be aware of redevelopment plans and the process before we get into this, because I think that sometimes there are questions about that, the process, instead of maybe the content of what I'd like us to look at tonight. Does anybody have questions about that in general? Okay. All right, so I think we're ready then to go on to the concept plan, and I'll bring the mic over because I think we're going to need to point out some things on the page. So there's a concept plan that's been amended since you last saw it in November. The main changes I've highlighted here, and we'll take a look at the images next. This plan is proposing fewer dwelling units. Before there were 364 units, now 318. There's less garage parking by approximately 70 spaces. Of this, close to 900 spaces of parking, 455 of those parking spaces would be public garage spaces. Currently, the 2 municipal lots, or 3 if you consider them to be 2 different ones on Beverly, they provide 383 parking spaces. So this 455 public parking spaces is an increase, but it's by less than 100 parking spaces. And that's to serve people who are shopping on Cedar Lane or doing anything else in the area that would need public parking and didn't want to park on the street. There's also some street parking that's contemplated on American Legion Drive. That would be parallel parking, 36 spaces. And there's also a commercial space which is intended for the offices of the Buddhist Center that would be relocated. There's also now in this concept plan 2 public open space areas totaling 7,750 square feet. These changes are an attempt to incorporate your feedback from the last public meeting. And so we hope that you are pleased with some of these changes, but I know that you'll still have more comments tonight, and that's fine. So We can get into the images. Next slide. Okay, this is just an overview aerial. I think some people weren't maybe at the other meeting, so I'll just point it out. Up here is the Beverly Road area on the top of the page, and you'll see that there is a parking garage on the left-hand side. And then this portion of the building on the right would have commercial area and also residences, multi-unit housing. The entrance would be from Windsor Road, the vehicular entrance. And also Beverly. So there's two entrances. Down below on the American Legion Drive North or West site, this L-shaped building is mostly unchanged from the last time. It's housing, multi-unit housing with garage parking on the lower level. It's now, the difference between the last time in these two areas is that they are now showing two public spaces, one along Alma Terrace at the north side of this L-shaped building, and the other along Garrison Avenue on the west side of the parking garage. Down below, there's one more multi-unit housing building, and this is just in that lower portion of the existing parking lot. It doesn't encroach into the whole parking lot. That would be reconfigured. This is just in the lower portion, and it would have garage parking down there as well. Next slide. So we can, when it comes to the public, when you guys come up and you want to discuss some of these issues and changes, we can go back to any of these slides. So don't think that, if we're moving past one and you want to look at it later, we can jump back. So, but I'll give you the highlights now. This is the Beverly Road building. It's like I just said, the parking garage is on the left. The residential and commercial space are on the back, and the right-hand side, it's showing some of the garage parking that would be sort of on the ground floor. Again, you see the public space on the west side of the building. Right now it's showing these tents or these booths, kind of envisioned as like an extension of the farmer's market, open to feedback, but just showing that at the moment. In terms of setbacks, which is the distance from a property line to the building, this building is showing a 10-foot setback from the front property line, which is this dark black line that you see, to the building. That doesn't include the sidewalk. At the rear of the building that's adjacent to the backs of the businesses on Cedar Lane, that would range a little bit between 0 and 15 feet approximately. And then on Garrison Avenue, the setback would be 20 feet from the property line and 30 feet from the curb. This building would have 96 dwelling units, 160 parking spaces for residential and commercial uses, and again, 455 public parking spaces. Can we go to the next one? So this is again, the west side of American Legion Drive, that L-shaped site. This is mostly unchanged from the last time in terms of layout, except that now it's showing that right here, it's just showing a landscaped open space. And there's a zoomed image that I'll show you in a minute. But it's showing that at the north side of the building. In terms of setbacks, there's a 10-foot setback from the American Legion Drive side on the right-hand side of the building, and a 10-foot setback from the lower part of the building where the garage parking is on the west side. This building is contemplated to have 94 dwelling units, 113 parking spaces for the residential uses, and then the 36 parking spaces that would be along American Legion Drive, parallel parking spaces. Next slide. So this is on the east side of American Legion Drive, south of the Stop and Shop parking lot. Mostly the same layout as last time, but we've got more details tonight. The front yard setback from American Legion Drive on the left-hand side of the page would be 15 feet approximately. The setback adjacent to the Stop and Shop parking lot would be 10 feet. And then on the east and south sides of the property, it would be a 15-foot setback. This building is showing 128 dwelling units with 170 residential parking spaces in a structured garage within the building. Next. So again, I mentioned that we would show this idea for some open spaces along the building frontages. As an overview, here's Cedar Lane running through the photo on the right in an east-west direction. And I've pointed out here the Chestnut Avenue Farmers Market Plaza. So running to the north on Garrison, that's where one of the open spaces is. Again, if you look in the image on the left, there are some tents that are shown sort of envisioned like an extension of the farmers market or a new farmers market space, but interested to hear your feedback. And then on the north side of the L-shaped building, again, extending from that existing plaza, it's showing just landscaped open space, and it could be programmed with different plantings, seating. Interested to hear what you say. Approximately 4,400 square feet would occupy the Garrison Avenue public space, and 3,350 square feet would account for the lower public space that's along Alma Terrace. Next. So here's where we'll look at the 3D view of the buildings. This is the overview, but I think it's easier to see when we zoom in. So if you could go to the next slide. So last time you saw a building that was 5 stories. Here it's 3 and 4 stories. Essentially along Garrison Avenue, the parking garage is showing 3 stories. Because of a grade change where Garrison Avenue actually slopes downward as it moves east, it becomes a 4-story building along Beverly, the garage. But here, then at the next building, the residential side of the building, that's 4 stories, but it's now showing that layer cake step back of approximately 6 feet at the front of the building for the top floor. So the 4th floor would be pulled back, essentially. That's what it's showing now. So there are some changes in terms of the height and the massing on this site. Next. This is the elevation view. In other words, the outside of the building. Yes.
Is that setback on the Cedar Lane side or on the Beverly side?
The step back?
Yes.
The step back is on the Beverly side.
Thank you.
Okay. If you could go to the next slide, it's a bit more zoomed in. Okay. So again, last time it was showing a 5-story building. Here, you'll see 3 and 4 stories. So on the residential side, you'll see that there are 4 stories, but that top floor is stepped back. Visually with the design, it's de-emphasized compared to the last design. The roof line of the 3rd story is more prominent, and the design accounts for a bit more vertical spacing to kind of break up the visual bulk of the building. On the garage side, you'll see again that this now accounts for the grade change where Beverly Road slopes downward as it runs to the east. So you'll see 3 stories on the Garrison Avenue side. There's this podium for at the corner for stairs. But then as you move eastward or to the left side of the page, it becomes a 4-story garage. And again, that garage accounts for 455 public parking spaces, as well as some of the residential parking component. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned there's public parking. In Teaneck, we're used to free public parking. You build these structures, is this going to be free public parking? Huh?
I'm being, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, we've heard the feedback from the past that that's something the public wanted, so there's no revenue plan to charge for parking. In the customer, in the shopping parking.
I know that there's a trade-off there. Because, no, just, I'm gonna say, if they don't get revenue from the parking, then it's in our taxes on our property. So same total revenue, but taxpayers pay more.
Are you saying you want to charge for parking or not? I'm not, which one do you?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm
Okay.
just raising it. You can say it.
Understood,
Okay.
understood, understood.
We can talk about it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Okay.
Let's-
Sure, you can go ahead.
So on that issue, I have a list, which I'll go to later, but on that issue of parking, who's going to be responsible to maintain the parking lot? Is that going to be on the part of the town, or will the owners of this building, should it be built, would the owners of this building be responsible to maintain the parking lot because their residents are going to park there?
Sure. As it relates to the residence parking, that would be the ownership of the residents. As it relates to the public parking, it'll be public parking, public maintenance.
Hi, question about the farmer's market. You keep referring to the Chestnut Street Plaza as the Chestnut Street Farmers Market. Is that a proposal? Is that the plan to move the farmer's market to that area?
I don't think that there's any plan right now in terms of,
Why-
and
why
this
was
is
it late?
feedback.
Okay,
This
so
is
why
feed-
was it late? I mean.
I think one thing that we've
You referred
heard,
to it a couple of times. as
Sure.
The Chestnut Road
yep,
Farmers Market.
I think that the feedback from some of the community input that we had during the master plan was that that plaza was pretty small as one of the only public spaces along Cedar Lane. And so whether the public spaces that are shown in this concept are supplemental or, replacing, maybe just in terms of some of the events are moved to some of these. I mean, this is something that I'd love to hear your opinions on it. So if we can maybe hold the opinions and start thinking about them, we'll have time to talk about that.
Okay, I just
but
was clarifying.
don't think
'cause
that
again, You
there's-
referred to it as the Chestnut Road Farmers Market, and there is no farmers market there now. There has not been.
Okay,
So
Or
I
the
was
plot-
confused.
sure. I mean, I know that it has been used in the past for that purpose.
No,
wait.
never.
So,
The
never- okay.
Cedar Lane has actually coming out in the next few weeks, quite a bit of events that are going to be happening on a weekly basis on the Chestnut Plaza. I think almost weekly, and I forget what night they're having it on, but not related to the farmer's market.
Okay,
There's no plans on that right
Great.
now.
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta run, you gotta.
Go ahead.
Clarifying question. On the parking lots closer to Stop and Shop, those would be public. What about Beverly Road? Is that also public or is that private? Is there a part that's public versus private?
Hang on, so is the question if the American Legion Drive parking lots are public?
Yes.
Those are not public. Those would be for residential use.
Okay, so then the Beverly Road parking lot would be the public lot.
That would encompass the public parking spaces, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This may have been covered some other time, but how are you figuring out how many parking spaces you need for the residential units?
Maybe Michael can chime in, but there is a ratio that needs to be met. And
That's what I'm asking.
yeah, there is a ratio.
Sure, there's a ratio that was agreed to in the settlement agreement between the town, Crossroads, and Stop and Shop. It's a parking ratio that Stop and Shop would be satisfied with, so that they understand that their surface parking for their supermarket customers will not be used for other purposes. That will be memorialized in a formal redevelopment plan. So that will be the zoning that that guides all the standards, including how much parking is needed for the residential component and all other components of the project.
Okay. I think we should finish up with some of these concept images so that we can get into your feedback. And I know that you've already asked some questions and maybe given a little bit of feedback, but let's get into that. And so we'll get through this. And again, we can come back to these images. As in terms of changes in this design along Beverly Road, the garage is a bit more residential in design in that it has these punched windows along the entire outside wall, along all floors, sort of to mimic a used building, although it's obviously a garage. And then I'd also just note that the ground floor of this residential and commercial portion on the east side is a bit more pedestrian friendly. It's got these floor to ceiling windows, some canopies, and some signage showing in this concept plan. There's also the landscaping that's shown on these plans, street trees and some shrubs that would be in the front yard. The next image, please. So as for the west side of American Legion Drive, again, this would only have residential units and residential parking within the building. This building is shorter than it was at the last meeting. It's now showing 4 stories. It also has the public space, which is a little bit obscured in this image, but it's on the north side of the building. Can we go to the next slide? And finally, the south site on the east side of American Legion Drive, that at the public meeting, the last one in November, received the least amount of feedback in terms of changes. And so it's remained at 6 stories and basically unchanged. Again, this has residential units and residential parking. So, so now I'd like to move into the feedback portion of tonight. And again, we can go back to these images because I assume that you'll want to look at them and reference them. Go ahead.
Feedback time, right? Cool.
Oh, okay. Well, just I'll preface it if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Could you just hold for maybe just a minute or two on the feedback? We'll get into it. I just want to kind of set everybody's mind up for how to go about this, but thank you. And we'll get to you. So first, I'd just like to go through very quickly some aspects that we can consider to make this a bit more of a structured conversation. We can jump around. I'm not saying we can't, but let's see what we can do. So if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, right here. These are some different aspects that we can consider tonight that would be very helpful to hear feedback on for preparing a redevelopment plan. I think I would like folks, maybe just a show of hands, to vote on the aspects that they want to talk about the most or first, just so that we can then move on from there and things can occur more organically. But to have a starting place that everybody mostly has a consensus on, that would be, I think, the best way to go, because if I go one by one, it may not be the things that you most want to talk about, and then we forget some of the other things. So first, it would be great to talk about massing. So that means the height of the building, the setbacks from the property line, how far the building is pushed back, or how close it is to the street or any other neighbors. The step backs, these are just some examples of step backs of a 4th story step back that's pushed away from the lower building walls. The design on the elevations that you saw, the outside wall design, the streetscape, the public open space, how it's programmed, what it looks like, the kind of greenery and landscaping that you'd like to see in general. And then next slide. In terms of the site, some of the more technical things perhaps, there is the grade change along Beverly Road, just something to consider. Drainage, certainly traffic generation and circulation concerns. Also talking about parking demand and the number of parking spaces that are provided, specifically in terms of the public parking spaces. And then affordable housing, which this project, as any multifamily project in Teaneck, would be required to have a set aside of affordable units, at least 48 units. You know, the municipality, Teaneck is committed to providing affordable housing, and they do have to work towards a new round of affordable housing obligations that will start in 2025 and run for the following 10 years. So that's definitely an important aspect of the project to consider, and folks may have comments on that. So those are some of the things that I think would be great for me to hear from you. We can deviate, but really quickly, maybe we can, yes,
Spatch, if I can make a suggestion.
yes, please.
I think the open space, the new public spaces that have been added to this concept plan are a new feature that we haven't seen before. So I think it would help to maybe go back and look at that in a little more detail and get some feedback on this new concept.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. How do folks feel about that? Talking about the open space first.
Why don't we just leave it open for us to talk about what we need to talk about?
You'd rather just do it in an organic format? Okay. I was trying to see if we could add some structure to this conversation, but you know what? It's okay. Flexible. Okay. So again, think about these things. If you could go back to maybe one of the early 3D, the first 3D image, that would be great just to set us up. Okay. So if folks would like to come up to the microphone, depending on how many folks come up, I might start a timer, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So we'll see how it goes. Go ahead.
Spatch, great job on your presentation. Just, you know, did a really good job going through the revised concept. I have a unique perspective on this, being that I live across the street, directly across the street from the proposed development on Beverly Road. So I have to look out my window and see the park. Currently it's a parking lot, but in the future would be a building. So please take my comments as, you know, as you know, constructive and unique, right? Like it's a close matter. So regarding the buildings on Beverly, you showed the proposed heights going down from 5 to 4. It looked like there was a step back on the 4th floor. Do you know what the size of that step back would be, what the proposed step back would be?
Yes.
It doesn't look like
It's apparently 6 feet. I know it looks like not a lot. 6 feet is what I've been told.
so. I know that, you know, you are presenting this, we're taking feedback.
Mhm.
I think the first point of feedback is that 6 feet needs to be further back. I'm not going to present a negotiating number at this point. I just think it probably needs to start in the double digits. If you're on the sidewalk, that 4th floor should not necessarily be something that's visible. And also, if you know, you look at the perspective of those 2 ghost buildings, or 3 ghost buildings that are sort of between, the existing residential buildings. You know, it's good to have that perspective to show what the scale is between the 2. But there's obviously a difference, right? So the further back that 4th floor is, and the more you can hide that height, I think it's a better sell to the community and the neighbors. The building facade, going back to the
Elevations, the zoomed in one, the second one.
so I don't know if you are able to.
Next one.
Yeah. So I think that the concept plans, the revisions have, it's a better facade than what was originally proposed. I think that having that difference in materials, at that reflect the Bell Avenue character, I would say we have a very cute, charming street. And I think that the difference in materials helps. I would also say that as many trees or mature trees, the plantings that go onto this road to mask or to sort of fit into the neighborhood, I think that's also important. So is that the facade for the building? Is that going to be brick? Like, what is the brown? Do you know what that facade would look like? What that
I'm
what the
being told
materials would be,
brick,
rather?
but I think there may be other materials that I'm seeing too. Hardy plank.
So if the closer we can get to brick, I think, or some sort of a brick facade, I think that would also help ingratiate it into the neighborhood. As far as the layout plan, if you go back, if you showed the Beverly Road layout, the thing that stands out to me is actually it's a few slides back.
The aerial.
Yeah, if you look
And,
at
and just so you know, your time is up, but since
Oh,
you're the
really?
first, I'll let you keep
I'll
going.
come back.
But maybe we can extend the time if people have longer feedback.
All
This
right.
is a
This is-
formal meeting, folks. So we're here to be flexible and make sure that people can be heard, but also we want to give everybody else a chance.
So the bank, there's right now a drive-through facade. There's right now a drive-through on the bank coming off of Cedar. The building's basically pushed up to the bank. So how that's going to impede traffic, that's going to impede the circulation of cars leaving the bank or going through the bank drive-through. So, yeah, that's something that property owner may very well have an issue with. So you may need to consider carving the building back even further. My last comment, because I know people are piling up, I have other comments that I'll come back to, but just as we're looking at this aerial, there's a commercial space on Beverly. That's not good. I don't, considering the use and the intensity of the commercial space that's existing on the Stop and Shop lot, to bring that intensity every Saturday to our neighborhood, I don't know that that's acceptable. And also where they park, where are they parking? Yeah, that's not a good use to put in that neighborhood.
Okay,
Sorry. That's potential. That's not traditional commercial, sorry. That's not traditional commercial. And it's not, it's used, it is a filler in case the church, the Buddhist center needs to move over there. So it's potentially a house of worship. It's not set in stone by any means. It's just in case the existing tenant wants to stay on site, which he may or may not. We don't think there's any feedback yet from them. It would only if that house of worship wants to move next to the other house of worship. In no means whatsoever is it going to be commercial, because your comments are spot on.
Would it make more sense to put that commercial use more on Cedar if the purpose is?
I think we also have it laid out in American Legion Drive as well, potentially on the lower floor. Not there. Okay. So Cedar where?
Corner. Oh, I'm just spitballing here. Cedar and Garrison. Essentially taking it away from there and maybe putting it
Okay,
closer
well,
to.
write that
yeah.
down. And again, nothing's set in stone because they even haven't approached us. They may want fully out completely.
Yeah,
So it's a maximum house of worship and the location noted what you said.
and just a quick answer to your question. This is showing that the parking for that use would be within the building. I think you had a question about that. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a very, very general comment. I would like every meeting to start with everybody up here introducing themselves so we know whose interests you represent, and a reminder of who owns this property, who's making the profit off of all of this development. I really think that should be upfront on everything. Thank you.
Can we-
would you
Yes.
folks want to introduce yourself?
Yes. First of all, I apologize. I think almost everyone knows many of us in the room, so that's a very valid point, and I appreciate that. Mark Schwartz, council member and the member of the subzoning committee.
Teaneck Mayor Michael Pagan.
Michael Ash, T-Nex redevelopment attorney.
Okay, just
And
forgive me,
everybody knows
because
Spanish.
I'm not used to this eye situation I have right now. Um, so I have a few comments and a few questions. So first of all, just so that people know who I am and who I represent, I'm co-leader of the Northwest of Cedar Lane Neighborhood Association, which covers from Beverly Road to Route 4, Windsor Road to River Road. Now, not every home has joined, but every home, you're in our neighborhood, Mr. Schwartz. You haven't joined the neighborhood association, though. Mr. Kaplan has, however. Not every home has joined, but we have over 100 homes who have. So I live on Bell Avenue, a few houses away from this proposed development. And one might say that I just don't want it in my backyard. But I've spoken to lots of people about this, and I can tell you, excluding you, Mr. Schwartz, or including you, Mr. Schwartz, I don't know 5 people who are definitely in favor of this. I've had a couple of people tell me that they are. So if you think that's what Teaneck residents overwhelmingly want, you're sorely mistaken. Now, the current master plan calls for apartment buildings not to be built adjacent to private homes. This project is adjacent to private homes. I'm curious as to whether the new master plan is going to have the same clause in it. And if it is, then this project is in violation of the master plan. I think the design is maybe an improvement. Our homes are frame and brick. Our homes have a more traditional look. This is a more modern look. And from what you just said, Spatch, it's not brick. And there's no detailed design. There's just some setbacks and so forth. I'm concerned about where the farmer's market is going to be. I'm concerned about when a traffic study will be done and who's going to do it. Where are the people on Chestnut and Alma Terrace going to park once this is built? Are they going to have to cross Cedar Lane and go to the Garrison Avenue parking lot, wherever the entrance will be? And I just want to make a comment about the open space. Well, let me say this first. Almost nobody in the immediate vicinity is in favor of this. Some people have said, a couple people have said they'd like to see something there because the parking lot's not nice. I personally think the parking lot should be nice, and then we don't have to have these buildings. The open space is meager. All the open space that you showed is no bigger than my property and spread out in many cases very thinly. There's going to be nothing happening on those public spaces. I'm not sure where the farmer's market's going to be. Is it going to be along Garrison Avenue, a little strip? How are we going to do that? So those are my comments and my questions. Thank you.
Okay. I can respond to some of those. I think you're just hoping to be heard. In terms, but I'd like to respond to a couple things. In terms of the master plan, it's premature to say what it's going to recommend. That's in the realm of the planning board. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they're going to have their public process to go through the master plan with the community. In terms of the farmers market and the open space programming, and what you've seen in this concept and it being too thin, that was your comment, or too maybe narrow. Yeah. Yeah.
You take 5,000 square feet, spread it out from Garrison to Cedar Lane, you've got like a 5-foot or 6-foot strip.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll note your comment. Okay. Right, it's 20 feet of setback from Garrison, but still, comment is noted. Okay. 30 feet from the curb of the sidewalk. The property line is this black line that's on the east side of the sidewalk. Apparently, it's it would be 20 feet. That's what this is showing. 20 feet from the property line, this black dotted line, and then from this curb, the other black line on the left-hand side, that's showing 30 feet. But your comments noted. So we can move on to the next.
Okay. One first comment is we've been in this meeting for over an hour. So I don't know how long we plan to run. And we're getting a chance to speak. I want to say that this plan is an improvement, but I don't think we're there yet. And there's some omissions that have not been mentioned at all. And I'll get back to the public parking. Public transit. There's no mention for public transit. There's no improvement for public transit. There's no preparation for public transit. I'm seeing like a potential in some of that L-shaped property could become a place where there are like half dozen different bus routes can pull off Cedar Lane and then pull back in. Because I think that parking is gonna, maybe we're at our peak in parking and we won't need as much parking in the future because we're not all going to be driving around in SUVs indefinitely. If you build for SUVs, parking, and you're gonna it may be empty, a burden on somebody, would have to be destroyed. I have a different view about the farmers market. Why don't you I want you to consider where the farmers market is now, where you would put some of that parking, cut back some of the parking, pull it away from Garrison, make that into a park, public park. And then on the Fridays, that becomes the farmers market. So we get the use, we don't get it, we don't have excess parking, we'll have a park, except when the farmers market is there. And it's away from Garrison and maybe it's fewer buildings. Also, we haven't talked about trees, but I give you credit, and I think if you're gonna have parking for 400, parking is expensive, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of parking space. Okay, and I don't think my neighbors and I are going to be enthused about having that done unless someone else is building it and maintaining it besides the citizens of Teaneck. We may not need that space. We need modern projections. And the trend is turning. But this is a step in the right direction. I hope you build from here and listen to some of the comments we're making. Thank you.
Could I ask you to stay for a moment? I'd like to ask you just a moment. You mentioned trees. Can I hear specifically what your ideas are on trees or your opinions? I want to get into the weeds a little bit.
I'm not a happy camper. We put in trees. Some of them are disgusting. Some of them are dead. They are not well maintained. And I got to walk by them twice a day. Especially the ones on Garrison Avenue where close to the intersection with Cedar Lane. Someone is not paying attention. And if new trees are put in, like the ward last year, they're an attempt, but we don't know what they're going to do. Friends of mine have said they look like sticks. So you need something that looks like real, but won't be a problem to maintain. And the burden on taxpayers for the public parking lot, if is going to be a burden.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Mayer. I don't want to repeat a lot of things, but I'm going to start with something new. Thank you, because I'm short. Uh, And that is, while I am more pleased that the entrance to this development, the Beverly Road development, would be from Windsor Road rather than from Bell Avenue, I really think that also might need to be rethought. Windsor Road, right across the street by the park, is the ambulance corps. And I suspect that there will be a lot of traffic with this new development that would be using Windsor Road, which currently, right now from Cedar Lane is one way, going into this development. So I'm not sure that the traffic really has been thought through properly. Not that I want traffic coming from Bell Avenue, but this is just something that I think should be considered. Likewise, I'm making the assumption that the parking garage on Sundays, the public parking, would be used by the church, which currently uses the parking lot. So I'm just assuming that would be it. And it's not clear where the Buddhist Center is. You're proposing that possibly the Buddhist Center would be here, but it might be elsewhere in town. And also unclear where the farmer's market could be. So, and my final thing is for the people on American Legion Drive, the L-shaped building, the people whose backyards face that building or abut that building, is the setback on American Legion Drive or also in their backyards?
So this is showing a setback of 10 feet compared to their fence line and the lowest point of the building.
Okay. That's awfully, and that's a 3-story building?
This is a 4-story
It's a
building.
4-story building right in their backyard. Yeah, that's not nice.
Could I ask you to talk about the Buddhist Center really quickly? I think Mr. Schwartz also talked about it, but just their option.
Right, so where the Buddhist Center goes, there's the potential to relocate onto the Beverly side of the project, but the Buddhist Center will work with the developer in the context of negotiating the project components. And they'll make a decision if they want to relocate back in the project or elsewhere, but they're being considered. And there are a number of moving parts to all of this, both public and private. And as we get closer to a more realized plan from the conceptual phase, we'll be able to, fill in a lot of those details. But they're absolutely part of the consideration in all this, and there's language to that in the settlement agreement. Can you just walk us through the farmer's market and what that's going to look like? 'Cause I think she mentioned that in her
Yeah,
comments.
could we go to the open space, the zoomed in open space aerial? See, I think it's probably a little forward. Yeah. Here. So this is all conceptual. This is, again, I think one of the participants already mentioned that they didn't think that this Garrison Avenue space might be sufficient for a farmer's market, but others may have different opinions. There is the plaza here on Chestnut off of Cedar Lane. These open spaces could be programmed in different ways. They could be configured differently. And so I think that we just are open to hearing what folks have to say. I think one of the suggestions was to turn this existing Chestnut Plaza into more of a park. Is that correct for whoever said it? To turn it more into a park that could host the farmer's market and just removing some of that parking. That's outside the project area, but I think that the people here are listening.
Right. Well, I think there's some concern by Stop and Shop if, every week there was going to be a pop-up farmer's market. And Stop and Shop wants to remain here. They want to reinvest in Teaneck. They want to be a part of this project. That's why a lot of the terms and a lot of the different elements of this project were parking being a very important one, are being, some of those negotiations were a direct result of input from Stop and Shop. So the farmers market concept, if you could point out, you know, where they have it located, and then the detail of it, you can see here, those, maybe if you get closer,
Yeah.
what you could see is there's a design, a rendering of kind of the pop-up canopies for the different farmers market vendors. And they're set up in a row along Garrison. Yes. Do you see the canopy details there? So the plan would be to have in this 20-foot setback, the ability to have call it a linear farmers market, where you would have, they're showing about a dozen or so vendors in the farmers market in that space.
Thanks for the clarification.
Good evening. My name is Hallie Wanamaker. I live on Church Street. I do not live even near this, but I'm very concerned about it. I'm a member of the East Votee Neighborhood Association, EVNA, which is part of the Coalition of Neighborhood Associations for a Better Teaneck. In addition to EVNA, this coalition includes the Northeast Teaneck Block Presidents Association, the Southwest Teaneck Neighborhood Association, the Northwest of Cedar Lane Neighborhood Association, and the new Friendly Neighbors of South Teaneck organization. On behalf of this coalition, I would like to read the following statement. The Coalition of Neighborhood Associations for a Better Teaneck strongly opposes further action on this development until the master plan is done. I don't even know why we're having this meeting tonight, because you said at the beginning we were going to have the master plan and then this. And all of a sudden we're making plans and the
cars looking for parking on Cedar Lane. And if there was the ability to have everyone park in the same place, go directly to a garage, it's going to relieve a lot of the traffic on Cedar Lane for people trying to find the ideal parking spot in front of the same. Excuse me.
Guys, let's go back to the common ground rules, one at a time, please. Thank you.
Instead of people driving around, circling blocks, looking for the ideal parking space. These plans work. It's been studied by planners and traffic engineers, and it relieves local traffic.
Next question that I haven't heard brought up at all, and it was brought up in November. Is there going to be any allocation of senior housing?
I do.
That's my question.
Powers, Tina, I think there was probably 95% of this population who, after having seen what Margaret Baker is facing in terms of that huge structure in front of her, said no. And
I don't think that, I, for the folks at home who are on Zoom, the woman who just made a comment or asked a question, she asked about senior housing and she's asking for a response. This right now, this concept doesn't contemplate anything specific related to senior housing, but that's your comment and it's noted. It's not contemplating anything specific.
The answer is, we will comply with the appropriate mix of affordable units that we are required to provide. Some of them may be senior units, some of them may be low income, some of them may be moderate. I don't have a specific answer to your specific question.
We don't. And it's the same answer now. I'm gonna start calling. Don't have an answer.
I'm going to say we have about 8 people in line waiting to ask a question.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I
Well,
think, yeah.
before you move on, we're still looking at a concept. We're still considering ideas. We're considering different components. This is not going to be a finished plan until a new master plan is adopted. That is a commitment. So there are elements of this that are still in draft. It's a moving target, as you can see. The densities are reducing, the parking count is reducing, and as we get closer to a finished plan, certain details will be concrete. We don't have an answer to your specific question today.
Okay.
That doesn't mean we won't ever. It just means we don't have it today.
Okay, let's move on to Dr. Powers.
But before we
yeah,
do,
okay.
I'm going to close the line. So if anyone else wants to speak, please get in line now.
Okay. All right, folks, let's settle down. Try to be respectful. There are folks on Zoom trying to listen in.
well,
All
let's
right.
have the
Thank you.
redevelopment attorney be respectful of our time so that we can tell you what we would like to tell you about it.
I think I'm being very respectful of everyone's
I don't
time.
think
Right.
you are, Mr.
Let's-
Ash. I don't think you have
Okay,
any point.
One at a time, folks, okay?
Okay.
Dr. Powers, thank you. Go ahead.
We don't have any idea what the actual regulations about affordable housing are going to be. We have sitting with our council not moving forward on it, even though the planning board has done so, with an ADU concept, which might very well provide far more than 48 units and far faster than this particular plan. I want to ask, whose concept plan is this that you presented, Mr. Ahan? Is it yours? Is it Mr. Ash's? Is it the developers? What we know is, in the prior A&R process, your firm worked with the developer to in fact do the development plan. That's how it was done before. So is this your plan? Or is it the conditional developer, and which leads into a second question. What of the public properties in both the ALD area and on the Beverly Road area have already been converted or in the process of being converted to someone else's ownership besides the public? And when do you anticipate that process, do you expect that to happen before a redevelopment plan is approved post master plan? Third question, how can we not be doing anything about public transportation? Mr. Vasky is exactly right about that. With this huge new process, it's going to throw all this additional focus on that area and not have had any answer to what we're going to do about public transportation. Mr. Ash's advocacy for the Metuchen plan, that was all about public transportation. This is not about public transportation whatsoever, so far as I can tell. You were told at the last meeting, the one that was held at FDU, that everyone there agreed that the Cedar Lane project should become and developed first and then get to the redevelopment plan. And we know that there's no redevelopment law requirement to move forward on this redevelopment plan at any specific time. So listen to the public. Why not do Cedar Lane first and then figure out what it is we would like to have on the two sides of that process? And finally, you were asked, Mr. Ash, what the ratio is of residential to parking lot, and you gave us a Stop and Shop answer. That is completely not responsive to the question you were asked.
Okay, you can sit, before the next person comes up, I'm gonna try to respond just a little bit, or as best I can. You asked whose concept plan is this? It's the interested redeveloper. Our office is tasked with preparing a redevelopment plan on behalf of the township. So sometimes in a redevelopment process, they don't have public meetings like this that are informal to get input before the redevelopment plan is even drafted. This is a case where the leadership of the township wanted to have public input on this concept, especially since it's unique, it's an interesting redevelopment situation. There was a settlement and that, so forth. In terms of what public properties have been converted or when they will be converted, I don't have that answer. I'm not sure if anybody here does.
Well, that would be after a redevelopment plan is adopted, after a redevelopment agreement is negotiated, and only after certain terms and conditions of that agreement are satisfied.
Okay. In terms of public transportation, I'm noting that that's a comment that a couple of people now have brought up tonight. And with the redevelopment process, there is the opportunity for off-site improvements. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But in some cases, if there's a rational nexus between a project and an off-site improvement, it can be a part of the redevelopment plan and process. But it's something to consider, and it's noted. Again, it's not always appropriate, so I don't want to promise anything, but I've heard you there. And I'm not sure what you mean about the Cedar Lane project, if you just mean Cedar Lanes in general and provide and just improvements along that corridor. I'm not sure. Yeah. Please to the mics for folks at home.
It was a major discussion at a meeting at FDU, publicly called again by the zoning subcommittee. I'm not sure quite why. to say what prioritization should there be? And what came back from the public that night, not captured in your list of things, nor, as a matter of fact, was anything about senior housing captured in your summary of your own summaries from earlier this year. It was said, let's figure out what rehabilitation or redevelopment of Cedar Lane would be, and on the basis of that, know what it is we want to have on the two sides of it. That was very clearly laid out. Were you there
Okay.
that night?
I wasn't able to attend that night.
Well, have you listened to the?
I've been briefed on it, but I might have missed that one part. And I just wanted to know if you were referring to a specific project or rehabilitation of the corridor in general. So you've specified. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
one and a half.
Okay. I think
One and a
we're
half
gonna-
is the parking ratio.
I think we're gonna, because of the number of
1.5.
people, because of the number of people, we're gonna set a 2-minute timer for everybody. Please be concise, just to be respectful to everyone that's waiting in line.
So I'll be quick. The farmer's market space that's on Garrison, that's not big enough. You've heard that a couple times. That just needs to be increased. Maybe look at the layout that the existing farmer's market is using right now, incorporate that into the future plans. Pedestrian safety needs to be really stressed in this redevelopment plan as it moves forward. If you're introducing this many more units, this many more residents, that's more people walking on the street. There's more people that should be walking on the street, especially if the stated purpose of this is to revitalize Cedar Lane. There should be people that are moving into this neighborhood or our neighborhoods should feel safe walking. This many people, more cars, you need increased pedestrian safety in this area. Where would the new Beverly Road residents park? So you said that the parking lot on Beverly would be public, but I'm assuming that they would also be parking in that lot, thereby it would not necessarily be 100% public. So that's, and you know, you can answer that as you will. The other thing is that Bell Avenue has a long stated drainage problem with what, I'm not going to go into the details of why that is, but there is a drainage problem. This plan should address it. You can't do a redevelopment plan in this area without addressing the drainage problem or increasing the storage. So right now there's a 40,000 gallon culvert on Beverly. Fast Tech, the town's engineer, recommended, I think like 80,000 here in the parking lot. So my recommendation is if that culvert can be expanded with this new development, that we can have an additional stormwater storage space. That would be ideal in mitigating the impacts of the development. Am I at 2 minutes?
You are at 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so I do want to try to address comments as quickly as I can. I'm noting them, but I think some folks will want to hear some answers. In terms of pedestrian safety, noted, drainage, it's my understanding that any project that would occur here would account for stormwater improvements. Okay, I think that was what needed to be said this time for
Okay,
that
I'll
comment.
try to be brief. Traffic study, traffic study, traffic study. You have a parking garage, a big one on Garrison and Cedar Lane. I know Ms. Wanamaker spoke about traffic on Cedar Lane. Traffic on Garrison, trying to turn onto Cedar Lane every morning, I drive it, is impossible. There will be how many more people parking there? 400, 500 more people parking there? It's, I don't understand how that's going to work, and we haven't seen a traffic study. Okay, train safety. We are also near railroad tracks, right? Trains go by. I think we're all aware of what some of the safety problems have been for trains around the country. How are you going to get people out? How do you evacuate people if there's a big train problem? If there's a, you know, something terrible spills on the tracks and into the town, whatever, another issue. Chris Brown said pedestrian safety, pedestrian walkways, making it positive for people to walk and not only drive to Cedar Lane. That could take care of part of the parking problem. I spent time visiting friends and family in Stockholm. They have car lanes, they have a pedestrian lane on almost every street in the suburbs, and they have a bike lane right next to each other. People bike to work, people walk, and people drive when they have to. That's it.
G-Bow said it all. I'm gonna keep it quick. So excuse my aesthetic. I just want to say one thing we could all agree here is that we're all outnumbered. We're outnumbered by one little species. We all know what this little species is. It's kids. So if you're adding 500 adults, that means you're adding triple that times kids. So if we don't have the traffic on lock, and we don't know what the drainage is like, and we don't know what any of this is like, this is gonna affect the kids. Traffic's gonna affect the kids because now we have to delay school opening, which means the kids gonna have to be in school later, or we cut the hours and they get more classes. Or, you get what I'm saying, when you get off work, the traffic on picking up these kids, now they have to extend the after-school programs and all of these things because now we have more traffic in the city. That's about it. My fault. I wanted you to go first. I feel bad.
Hi, I'm Debbie Becher. And my concern was also having to do with the railroad tracks and the concern that lower income housing would be put next to the tracks and they traditionally have been in less environmentally sound areas. And I don't think that's something we want to continue. So make sure that lower income housing should not be where it's the least safe section of town.
Howard Rose. I have some concerns the way this is being, and I'll use a kind word, fostered upon the people of Teaneck. We have a situation where we're told, if we're doing something, would you like plan A, plan B, plan C with this facade and that facade? Well, the question isn't really, the word if. If you're doing it, this, and this. And then you grab onto that as if we're saying, yes, we agree it should be done, when in fact, we don't agree that it should be done, even though we're saying if it were done, we're picking A, B, or C. So that's really very problematic. I feel like we're fighting a tide here of something that's going to be done, regardless of what we say, regardless of the fact that we have adequate parking for the most part now, for shopping, for Cedar Lane. I see what happens on Cedar Lane. I'm there every day. Try and get off American Legion Drive onto Cedar Lane right now. When you increase the traffic on that, it's going to be horrendous, as opposed to just terrible at times during the day. Cedar Lane, get that bus to stop right by Garrison, just west of Garrison on Cedar Lane, and you can't make a turn. You can't make a right turn from Garrison. That's problematic. That helps build up traffic. And there'll be more traffic coming from these multi-story garages that people seem to not want. I appreciate the order and the concern and the work and the thought that all of you are putting into this. I just don't like the direction. And a lot of people are in a similar situation. You're trying to do something beneficial for the township, yet it's something that's just not wanted. No one's bringing back the nostalgia of 1920s Teaneck. Nevertheless, we'd like to maintain what we have in 2024 for the future, as opposed to see it become Teaneckopolis. Just don't want that.
Just as a brief response, it's my understanding that the township, through the settlement agreement, needs to work towards a redevelopment plan. There's still a site plan application that comes after a redevelopment plan, and a planning board gets to consider it just as they would any other application. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. Bob Lazaroff, and I want to echo what some of my neighbors were talking about. I want to echo two particular concerns that were brought up today. The first is the farmers market, which is beloved by probably everybody in this room. And I realize with this kind of plan, it's going to change, but I would invite you all to spend some time when it reopens, I think in June, on an afternoon and see what it is like, that kind of thriving space that would be severely compromised by some of these visions. The farmers themselves come in these big trucks, and those trucks are part of the farmers market where they have all of their produce from. And so it's a very big extravaganza, which we welcome as neighbors of the farmer market. And I think that you need to see what it's like now, so you have a vision of what it could be, rather than just this sense of generic farmers market, and they could have a couple pop-up tents on Garrison. My second point is about parking. And I too went to that FDU meeting back in the fall, which was about Cedar Lane redevelopment and the problems of Cedar Lane, but parking was a big part of it. And some of the store owners from Cedar Lane, including Howard, if I might cite you as well, and Buzz from Lark Street Music, said that parking garages would not change anything. Buzz from Lark Street Music, his customers come with amplifiers and heavy stuff. They can park 75 feet away in all these empty spaces that are there now. But it's what happens is people don't want to do that. They don't want to move their selves. They want to double park so they can run in the store 10 feet away. Even with huge parking garages, that's not going to change because the parking lots are there now underutilized. You've got empty parking spots on this, what you now call the area in need of redevelopment. We have plenty of parking spaces there now. And as Buzz would talk about that, he would have used the word hogwash, but he's kosher, so that would not have been allowed. But it's a bunch of malarkey, I'll use that word, that people double park because there's no parking in Teaneck. They just don't want to walk. It's as simple as that. Those are my points. Thank you.
Hey, Avi Berliner, the Lower Western Cumberland Neighborhood Association. We applaud your efforts to present a concept and a drive to do something. Nothing is not an answer. I'm going to repeat some of the points that have been made just so that you hear them coming. The plan is not perfect, but it provides a mechanism and plan to welcome new young families and build Teaneck and help to keep our aging neighbors close by. We know we have ADUs. We know people are trying to stay in town, staying on their properties, which may have tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. Costs to maintain is not affordable, is not what anybody wants to do when they're on a fixed income, as those costs continue to rise. You may not have the answer to what the affordable housing rates will be, but it sounds like that's definitely part of the plan. I was also at the Cedar Lane meeting, and I'll repeat here, I really love the look, having grown up in Essex County, what ended up happening in South Orange and Maplewood, as well as what Westwood has done. Again, we had this discussion. There are differences in the layout. There's the railroad, there's a separation between the residential and the commercial spaces, which we don't necessarily have the luxury of here, particularly along Beverly Road, but being able to integrate this development into the look and feel of the neighborhood, where there's predominantly and traditionally Tudor and Cape style brick facades, I think would make sense. And I think that may have been a point that was brought up by someone else. Transit and traffic considerations, transit and traffic, excuse me. Transit is an issue here, both ferrying people to the trains as well as the buses. We know that Cedar Lane does get congested at times. We know that trying to cross the train tracks, either on Cedar Lane or the bridge, you can wait 5-10 minutes in the morning, afternoon, or evening. Frankly, by the lights to cross the bridge, you can wait 10 minutes just for the light to change at 3 in the morning. We have TVAC along that corridor. We have the police station. We have the fire department. I think we just need to make sure that those emergency services won't be retarded and that we can actually maintain that level of service. Any alignment on the reimagining from Cedar Lane? I know that between that and the master plan, there were ideas that were put out there, but if we're proposing a facade here, we want to make sure that we're not tying ourselves to a look and a feel and a layout that may not be consistent with what we want to do or we may have to do later on. I think that we try to compare these plans to Hackensack, particularly along the waterfront. They had a blank slate, right? It was a factory, it was an industrial area, it was frankly blighted. Whether or not it was legally considered as such, I'm not sure. We don't necessarily have that luxury here. Again, this is integrated into a pre-existing neighborhood, into pre-existing buildings. We want to make sure that we're not just boom going out there. And will the businesses along Cedar Lane still have access from the rear lot, or if folks are parking, are they now going to have to walk all the way around or go through some underground corridor? Thank you.
Hi, how are you? I'm Paul Seidelman. I live on Sagamore near Phelps Park, so I'm not really close on top of this area. but I do have concerns. I agree with what everyone else has said so far. I don't think we have enough space for the farmer's market, and I was a little bit concerned with what seems to be confusion on your part regarding the Chestnut Street area where the farmer's market is not, and I understand that the supermarket doesn't want it there. But I'm just concerned, as everyone else has said, about the various support services, be it the traffic, be it the schools, be it the police and fire, and whether there have been any studies. I don't know when that takes place. Is that part of the master plan study? I just don't know what has been done so far to date to see what the stress will be on our existing services and what will be borne by whatever developer puts up. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Margaret Baker, Teaneck resident. I'm here because I'm a victim of area in need of redevelopment. I don't mean to take up your time, but I have to say this. When they got ready to do the redevelopment on Decatur Avenue, I went to the meetings. I asked for meetings for the people that were directly involved that got the letter from the developer. And by the way, that's the only letter I got. Mr. Swartz claimed letters were mailed to me. I never got them. And it's 2 years later, so I don't know how you sent them. I went to the town hall to get a copy of the records. There's no copy. The one letter I got was from Dean, the manager, explaining the miscommunication, non-communication from the town. We weren't allowed to have this type of meeting. Why? You took and you put, and I'm facing directly 6 stories in the front of my house. I counted the windows on the first floor, 17 across, and do that 6 floors. I have to burn my lights all day long because it's so dark. The building destroyed our neighborhood. And we had no input. I went to the meetings and I told him about the situations and nothing was done. I live right off of 4 on Decatur. That's a nightmare. Indy 500. I've been asking for stuff to be done to make it safer for us. We are there now. I get told, oh, when the developer finishes this, it's going to be done, that's going to be done. Forget that. I'm there now. And I've been there nearly 40 years. So why is it different for our neighborhood? And we don't get to voice ourselves like others. Why? And you put up a 6-story building directly across from my house. It takes the whole block. I ask questions, no answers. No answers. And as far as I'm concerned, like I said at the meetings, it's not suburban Teaneck, not where I live. It's urban Teaneck. And the traffic, 400 parking spaces, 2 levels of parking right at Route 4, the intersection. It's a nightmare. and nothing has been done. And I've been asking for improvements. Nothing. So those of you that are talking, I can tell you, I'm there, I'm living it, and it's hell. So don't tell me about a master plan and being close to residential. You took down a residential house and you included that. You changed the zone, and that wasn't right. You violated your own master plan. So don't make believe like, oh, we have to do the master plan. That's just words on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. You can come.
I just want to know where you.
I'm holding up 2 fingers when you hit 2 minutes, okay?
Oh, you don't want to
No,
address.
it's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having this meeting. Thank you for continuously having these meetings. I think it's a work in progress. We can't necessarily say it's set in stone. There were some good points. Please listen to the residents specifically that live near the area. I heard some really good points about setbacks. I just wanted to add, Never Alone and the American Legion are really good to our neighborhood. We feed several families. We do a lot in that area. By 10 o'clock on Saturday, there's probably about 35 to 40 cars lined up in the parking lot, and we begin to feed them around 11 and hand out food. If you could make sure you incorporate something with them. I know once this gets started, you know, where would those families go? Where would those people go? I know we move stuff over to actual American Legion, but you know, are they gonna have to come around the back way? Like if you can incorporate something with them, that
So
would be great.
you're referencing
Never Alone as well as our American Legion, the post there.
Never Alone, which
The
is a
organization,
charitable
sorry.
organization.
It's a charity organization,
Right.
right on American Legion.
And you're affiliated with that group
No, I'm not. I mean, I volunteer, but I'm
Right.
not the owner.
across from American Legion Drive parking lot.
Yeah.
Right. I think we can consider some community benefits that would benefit organizations in Teaneck.
I'll be very brief because I already spoke, but one of my questions was not answered. There are people who live on Alma Terrace and Chestnut. There's not enough parking there for them, and they pay the town to park on the parking lot that runs along Alma Terrace, intersecting with American Legion Drive. At night, there's usually about 50 cars parked there. Are those people now going to have to park if you build this? And I say if you build this, are they going to have to park in the parking garage and walk across Cedar Lane and walk all the way to Alma Terrace or down Chestnut? So that's one question. And the second thing is, if this project is going to happen, and I have a big if, but if this is going to happen, and I failed to mention this before, I think that the south end of the Stop and Shop lot should be exclusively senior housing. Look around this room. There's a lot of gray hair here. And these people, most of these people, I'm sure, own single homes. I'm a single individual. My house is paid off. I can't go into affordable housing because I don't qualify. I don't qualify for low-income senior housing. But there might come a time where I want to sell my house and move into an apartment and stay in town. There's no senior housing that fits my needs and the needs of many of the people here. You might want to consider that as an option there. Thank you.
When you say senior housing, are you referring to
55
age
plus,
restricted?
yeah.
Age restricted,
Yes.
55 plus, okay.
And on your
65 plus, better.
on no youngsters. On Alma Terrace and Chestnut, you mentioned the parking. There could be a parking study that's done at some point, whether it's before the site plan application or as part of the redevelopment process. Your comments noted that people park there overnight. It's a consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Wendy Thompson, Martens Avenue.
With regard to the parking garages, you've been speaking about a lot of the problems that you perceive it will solve. But one thing that no one has brought up thus far, I haven't heard it at any of the meetings, is the safety issue. Who will be ensuring the safety of those using the parking garages? Because I will tell you that as a woman, I avoid parking garages like you can't imagine. And I will stay home and I will order from Amazon rather than risk my safety going into a garage, especially alone. And even if I were to go in accompanied, who's to say that there wouldn't be a group of thugs waiting, lying in wait? So if these are going to be public parking garages, then that burden would fall upon our police force, I would imagine. So will we be increasing the force? Will someone be stationed there? Will they just be passing through every now and again? Has that been thought about? Because I will not be using these garages. I'm only a few blocks away, and with the extra congestion and traffic and density of the population, there will probably be more crime. I mean, it's not unrealistic to think so. So I think I'm going to be avoiding that area altogether. And that won't be doing very much to make better our downtown, which is, I think, the whole point of this. Safety. And with regard to the traffic study, there's a lot of thought and planning and detail.
To the mic, please.
There's a lot of thought and planning that has gone into these concepts, but I still can't imagine that all of this has been done without any traffic study. What are we waiting for? Why hasn't that been done thus far?
So just on safety really quickly, I mean, there are things in terms of, in any building to make it feel safer, things like lighting, cameras, things of that nature, but garages are garages. You know, if you're a person who's uncomfortable in a garage, and the lighting and maybe security cameras aren't enough, you know, it's something that personally, yeah, I am, you know, and then I think some people have mentioned public services, the strain on public services, and it's something that has to be considered. I think you know, sometimes in applications, there are letters from the fire department in a site plan application that often state some of their concerns and things of that nature. So there are points in a process that can consider some of these public, you know, public services and the impact on them. Okay.
Hi, my name is Libby Klein, and I live on West Laurelton Parkway, which is not really very near any of the immediate neighborhood of what we're discussing. But I do often walk to Cedar Lane down Garrison, and I do often walk around the Bell Avenue, Sagamore area, and I know that that has had a lot of flooding issues, and I do realize that there was one other person who mentioned those concerns. I would just like to echo that and really press for that, because I can't imagine that since the town hasn't really, in my understanding from residents who live there, hasn't really addressed the flooding issues on Bell Avenue to date, that certainly we want to make sure that any building that gets done in this area we're discussing tonight is not going to just make that even worse or spread that to another part of the area. So I just hope that's going to be addressed at some point. I just have a quick question, which is that the third area you discussed, which is the smallest area at the far end of the Stop and Shop parking areas, I'm just curious as to, I don't know what currently is on that property right now, right? That's it.
We could go back to the site overview. There's an aerial. This one. So it's currently just an extension of the parking lot. It's this, on the right-hand side of the page, it's this portion of the existing Stop and Shop parking lot. This is a 3-story housing building just to the south with their parking lot. And so if you were to drive past, it would be here. So if you see the other renderings, you'll still see this building.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. You mentioned the ratio earlier as 1.5 in terms of residences to parking numbers of cars. I'm not sure. Can you just be more specific about what that ratio is of, it's 1.5 of what? I'm not sure.
I mean, I can, I think, explain this. 1.5 cars or parking spaces are provided per dwelling unit.
Per dwelling unit,
Per
not per
dwelling
person.
unit.
Okay.
No, not per person. And so this would be, aggregated in a total. And so if you had 2 dwelling units, 3 spaces would be required. So it's not that a half space is provided. It's that it's aggregated and calculated as a total and provided at that ratio.
Thank you. I just,
So
I don't
again, it
understand how
recognizes that some families may have, or residents may have 1 car per household, some may have 2. That's kind of where the 1.5.
Okay.
I think I said 318. And the number of residential parking spaces. Let me just. My math. It should be 443. But that also includes commercial. There's the commercial space. And then there's 36 parking spaces, street parking spaces along American Legion Drive. So it's not a perfect calculation, but.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. Are you ready?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Michael Kladsky. I live on Cumberland Avenue, which is roughly about 3 blocks from this parking lot that everyone's talking about so much tonight. And I want to talk about a few things, but mostly I want to focus on the community improvements aspect here. I think there's a lot of opinions in the neighborhood about density. I know there's quite a few people who think that they want to have 6-story buildings like we've seen in other successful downtowns. There's just as many people who think that we should have nothing. It's been very heated in all of our parks, on our streets, and our doorsteps, in our backyards. We've been talking about this for the past like 3 years, right? You started this conversation during COVID, and every backyard I've been to in the entire neighborhood has been talking about this every now and again, and there's not a consensus. I don't think you should let anyone in this room make you think there is a consensus. There's just as many people who think that this is way too small, but that's not here nor there. That's the redevelopment plan that the municipality and the developer are jointly hiring Minowasco to develop and present to us tonight. But that's a different aspect. I regularly walk down Bell Avenue through this parking lot, through the alleyway, to the marked crosswalk in the middle of Cedar Lane, walk through the alley to Stop and Shop. I have a backpack. You can see me getting my steps to go buy milk, I buy bread, I buy vegetables. I basically stock up on a daily basis because I've got 3 kids and they go through a lot of stuff all the time. I get my exercise. I basically sit at a desk all day. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I noticed that in your plan, you're creating what appears to be a superstructure in the parking lot that's not porous. So right now I walk through the parking lot. Will there be high quality, landscaped, lit, comfortable places where someone who's walking can feel dignified? I know I've been to Ridgewood where they just built a new parking garage, and the parking garage is beautiful. When you walk alongside it, it looks like you're walking through a New York City, privately owned public space that's like landscaped next to a plaza next to a skyscraper. Are we gonna walk through a garage and then try to like hop over a 4-foot wall at the other side to get to the alley? Like, it's not clear here. I think that's an important element. And then additionally, I saw that there's a 30-foot setback from the curb proposed for Garrison Avenue. It's not quite enough. It's about 7 to 8 feet more than what's there now. Can we make it work? We will. The Chestnut Street Plaza has a slope issue. I went there the other day and I tried to see if you could put a table there. They're going to struggle doing that. I think that the town has leverage here with the development plan, and you shouldn't really care what Stop and Shop thinks in this regard. You should tell them that if you want to play ball, you're going to accept the farmer's market next door, because honestly, everyone at the farmer's market is going to go to Stop and Shop also. We can't buy everything we need at the farmer's market. Come on. That's crazy. There's many more comments, but I think that the town should really focus on trying to get community improvements here. You have one shot at this, whether it's improving intersections in terms of like, better crosswalks, pedestrian safety, benches along our sidewalks, landscaping, all these things. Do it once, do it right. Thanks.
Thank you. Our last comment for the evening.
Okay, one more quick question. We talked earlier about the retail space on Beverly Road. And that retail space is, it sounds like being reserved, at least for now, for the Buddhist center to move to. But nobody's said what would happen to that space if the Buddhist center decides not to move there. Are we going to have more apartments there? What's going to happen?
Well, that's an open question. I don't expect it would be more apartments on the first floor there. We don't know. Maybe.
Is that all we have for comments right now? That's it? All right, okay. No, I really appreciate everybody coming out. I think that, this is a very engaged community. Everybody cares a lot. And so it's important to note down your perspectives. In terms of the specifics, some of the things tonight that I heard, and maybe we can go back to the aerial with the concept shown. I know folks want to go home. Just one before this. So some of the things that we heard, just to recap, and this is not everything. I know we touched on a lot of topics. We touched on whether or not these public spaces were enough for either a farmer's market or just enough in general, and how they maybe should look and feel, whether landscaped or providing some relief, benches, that sort of thing. I think we heard about parking in general and traffic, not just on Cedar Lane, but on Garrison, parking within the existing municipal lots and how to accommodate that if folks can't park in the garage. We talked about the senior housing component and some people's desire to see senior units. I know things are escaping me, and I've made a lot of notes, so if I didn't mention your concern, I'm just kind of pointing out some of the ones that are on my mind right now. If folks have any more questions or comments, I'll be here after the meeting, staying for a little while, but we could go to the last slide, I think, right now. I know folks generally want to go home. It's late. I just want to share with you some next steps. I think we've already gone through this pretty much, but again, this is, we're gonna take your comments. The master plan needs to have its public process and go through its process to adoption. A redevelopment plan will then be prepared. And there will be a public hearing on the redevelopment plan at the planning board. They make recommendations to the council, who are ultimately the ones who adopt it. The public has a chance to comment at any public hearings. Once a redevelopment plan is adopted, a site plan application has to occur. So things don't happen quite so soon. They don't happen right away. And the planning board has to review it, and they have to vote on it. And only then do permits get issued. Could you go to the mic, please? Sorry, just because we have folks at home on Zoom.
Yeah, fine. This is boilerplate. We could all have a piece of paper that says what the steps are, what we have to do, and what it means, the redevelopment plan versus what the other plans you mentioned. You take up time, stuff that should have been delivered and prepared for us. as the citizens who pay the taxes, who went to the council, and they hired you, okay? And we want the service, and we want it directly and clear. So handing things out, distributing things, or putting on the website, these basic definitions, because we're not planners, we don't have, you should give us a chance to see them. I don't write that fast. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think I've heard that it would have been helpful to have this presentation before the meeting tonight. Yes.
So just in terms of the process, when it gets to the public hearing at the planning board, that means that the town council would have voted on first reading for the redevelopment plan. The public hearing is perfunctory to second reading. So I think just as a, as a resident, I shudder to think that this is the last opportunity for input before drafting a plan. So I would strongly consider our elected officials to have another opportunity for input before there's any vote on a redevelopment concept. Just this can't be the last time before the council takes a vote. So just that input.
Yep.
So I want to say that I agree with Chris Brown. I think that having tonight being the basically closing the door on public input is a mistake. I think that the slides from tonight, I'd like to request that the township post it to the website, make it available us to share by PDF, and then extend the comment period by 14 days where people can send comments to a designated email address or a form on the township website, and that could be formally included in the public record for this. Thank you.
I will say, I don't necessarily have an issue with the next steps that are up there. By the way, Mr. Mayor, it would be great to have a large presentation screen to project. I mean, even my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. But if there could be a timeline attached to this, right? We have no idea if this is something where, you may already have something in your back pocket, or you may consider it 95%. I don't know, right? Where this could go to the planning board maybe next month, in which case it could then be recommended and go to council the following month, where by the summer, this presumably could be a done deal. In 2 months, this could presumably be a done deal. It may also be that your plan is to come back in a year with a finished plan, in which case there'd be a much longer time frame to actually get shovels in the ground, by which point the master plan, the Cedar Lane development plan, some other projects in town, budgeting may have happened that may change certain aspects. A timeline at some point would also just be a really interesting piece of information to understand some of the additional constraints which we're dealing with.
I'll just address those couple of comments. Number one, this will definitely be posted online after tonight. And in terms of timing, again, the master plan would be adopted first before a redevelopment plan is prepared. And so given that the master plan is not up for adoption yet, it's nothing imminent. I don't have a specific timeline, but that's partly because we're waiting on some other, the master plan process to play out. I think. Okay. There was just a public comment for folks on Zoom. It was just reiterating and stating that they're not sure about the master plan process. Okay. Does anybody else have anything? I don't see anybody coming up, so I think we'll close it. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night.